Friends, again, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for the chance to share some words of Torah with you this evening. It's always an honor for me to do so, and I thank the congregation for allowing me to have this free pulpit to say what I want when I want to say it. Judaism evolves. Without constant creativity and self-correction, Judaism can't survive. This is a fundamental principle of Reform Judaism. Keep the tradition alive. Be dedicated to it. Be passionate about it by affirming it in love, but recognizing when there is need for progress. Here is one of the best examples of this: egalitarianism in Judaism. Reform Judaism has spearheaded the equality of men and women in Judaism for decades. The Reform movement ordained Sally Priestland as the first American woman rabbi in 1972. She just retired after a long, distinguished career. And Reform Jewish women in Israel stand firm each new month of the Hebrew calendar to pray at the Western Wall, even when there is strong, even violent opposition to them. There are indeed strong women found in the Jewish Bible: Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, Miriam, Shifra, and Puah, and we need to recognize them. But overall, and we have to be candid and honest about this, women have less power than men in the Torah. Women are not counted in the biblical census. Women cannot initiate divorce in Judaism until very recently. Women in general do not inherit land except when there's no male heir. Women are not part of the priesthood. Women who are accused of adultery must go through a horrible ritual which is both physically and emotionally painful. Men do not. The Torah generally does not empower women. It sees their power as secondary to men's power. This lack of power is seen in our portion for this Shabbat. Let me read to you a couple of parts of the beginning of this portion that will illustrate what I'm trying to develop. And I quote, "If a man makes a vow to the Lord, or takes an oath imposing an obligation on himself, he shall not break his pledge. He must carry out all that has crossed his lips. Keeping our word is fundamental to a functioning society, in commerce, in justice, in personal relationships. It all depends on expecting that what comes out of our mouth is trustworthy." So far, so good. But the Torah then teaches something where it feels really uncomfortable for modern readers. It records the ancient law that a woman's vows can be nullified by her husband, providing that he cancels her vows immediately upon hearing them. If he delays in silence, her vows become irrevocably binding. Let me read to you what the Torah says. "If she should marry while her vow or the commitment to which she has bound herself is still in force, and her husband learns of it and offers no objection on the day he finds out, her vows shall stand and her self-imposed obligation stand. No objection, it stands. But if her husband restrains her on the day that he learns of it, he thereby annuls her vow which was in force, or the commitment to which she bound herself, and the Lord will forgive her." In other words, men can nullify the vows of a woman. Now, we find this law to be offensive. That goes without saying. A system that doesn't empower women on an equal basis is a system that we question, or we want to challenge, or we alter to make it work for us. We do not need to defend the indefensible. But there is a moral value hidden within this teaching. It is striking that the Torah insists that the husband either uses power instantly or he loses it forever. He must act immediately or he loses his right to nullify this vow that his wife had already taken. Why? After all, if he has the authority to nullify her oath, then why can't he choose to exercise that power later on? The rabbis of the Talmud, who have this tradition and want to interpret it so that it will make sense for their generation, see this in a very interesting way. The Talmud has an entire tractate called Nidarim, devoted to the rules of vows. In Nidarim, it states that an unspecified silence means agreement. The medieval commentator Sforno teaches, and I quote, "When a person has the ability to protest and remain silent, his silence is similar to verbal consent. When you do not say something to disagree, it is as if you agree with what has been said or done." Very beautiful, simple, and logical understanding of silence. Rabbi Brad Artson, a distinguished commentator on the Torah, writes on this issue beautifully. Let me quote him. He says, "Silence is assent. How often do we face acts of injustice or callousness with silence? A derogatory joke in our presence, and an act of selfishness or cruelty, or simply reading of political oppression in our newspapers. All of these instances summon us to choose a side. We can either verbalize our opposition immediately, or through our silence, we become allies of the act or words we abhor. There is no neutrality," he says. "Silence is assent." Not speaking out against a wrong is being a co-conspirator. What we think privately to be unjust means nothing if we don't verbalize our protest. Artson's examples can be easily added upon. Witnessing a parent being verbally abusive at the supermarket but saying nothing. Being present at a meeting, not feeling comfortable with what is being decided or the flow of the conversation, but not willing to speak up because we don't want to be labeled as a troublemaker. Hearing an anti-Semitic remark and keeping quiet instead of taking a stand as a proud Jew. Seeing a woman being mansplained and not objecting. We can either verbalize our opposition immediately, or through our silence, we become allies in the act or words we abhor. The famous 1946 poem of Master Martin Niemöller, best known for his opposition to the Nazi regime during the late 1930s, describes this challenge. Very famous words. "First they came for the communists and I did not speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists and I did not speak out because I wasn't a socialist. And then they came for the trade unionists and I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me and there was no one left to speak for me." Friends, let's not be unrealistic. Every one of us only has a certain limited influence. We know that. But that cannot be an excuse to hide or to be afraid. If we want someone to speak out for us, we must speak out on behalf of others. Here is my challenge to all of us, starting with me. Shout out when it's necessary, even if it will make others uncomfortable. That's what a decent people must be willing to do. Pick an issue that you believe is crucial. Study up on it. Talk to other people about it. Write letters to the editor about it. Post on social media about it. Join organizations or discussion groups that bring together people who have common concerns. Silence is acquiescence. Speaking out is embracing our God-given ability to bring justice to the world. Let me close with the words of William Faulkner, who said these words which are so poignant. Never be afraid to raise your voice for honesty and truth and compassion against injustice and lying and greed. And if people all over the world would do this, it would change the earth. Shabbat shalom.